What happens when the entire software industry gets repriced on the cost basis of AI? When AI procurement agents are pitting your product against 5 competitors in real time speed trials, and when every project management tool builds the exact same agent platform. Welcome to Unsolicited Feedback, where we dig into the messy realities of building in the age of AI. I'm Brian Balfour, founder and CEO of Reforge, and joining me today is a good friend, Aaron White. Aaron is the former founder of Price Intelligently and blissfully acquired by Vendr, where he served as CTO for a couple years. I love talking to Aaron as he is in the thick of building AI tools and his company in a completely different way for the AI era. He always has a forward-looking take. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a massive shift happening right now. The entire industry is scrambling to shift from all-you-can-eat, seat-based subscription models to credit-based models that few consumers actually understand, and all of the secondary effects that emerge from that. We also tackle the launch of Notion's agent platform and how it feels like every project management tool from Jira to Glean to Notion to Monday has the exact same strategy. Grab your coffee, keep listening, and let's turn these insights into your unfair advantage. But before we dive into the full episode, there's more than just the AI market that's been on fire. That includes the Reforge product team. We just launched another new product, Reforge Research, which combines an AI user interviewer with AI surveys to completely change how you capture net new insights from your customers. Product teams typically face an impossible choice when they want to learn new things from their customers. They either need to blast out surveys to get shallow responses, or they can run human-led interviews, which are super time-consuming, expensive, and complicated, and have really long cycles. And with both of those, you're still stuck manually synthesizing all the results, trying to join it with all your other data, and trying to make it actionable for other teams. Research just ends up being a huge bottleneck. Well, with Reforge Research, we've completely changed that with our AI surveys and AI user interviewer. Our AI interviewer generates a discussion guide from scratch based on your learning goals. That discussion guide guides the AI interviewer, and it runs a dynamic conversation just like a senior user researcher would. Your customers, they can take it on any time, any schedule they want to, and conduct it in any language, especially for those of you with international customer bases. They can do all of this without any coordination hell required. And finally, all of those results automatically synthesized and analyzed in real time, joined with all of the other important business metrics and data about your users. Completely change the way that you do user interviews and customer research. Open up new use cases that were completely not possible before. Go to reforge.com/research to find out more. I feel like this is going to be a never-ending. Fareed and I touched on it on a previous episode, which is just the actual costs of AI, how that's translating to monetization models, which then flows through, honestly, to everything else, like acquisition models, because this year's been a whirlwind of where we started and where we are now. I am personally feeling it on the Claude side of things. I had to spin up 2 Claude Max accounts just to get the work I was doing done because I was getting cut off so quickly. But it's just not just them, but it feels like Claude, ChatGPT, Cursor, all the AI prototyping companies have gone through massive, big pricing changes around this. And so there's multiple ways that we can attack this topic. But as you've seen all of this play out, I'm just interested from your perspective, Aaron, kind of what's going through your mind.
This hits a real sweet spot for me because the last 2 companies I was involved with, one was helping SaaS figure out pricing, which is a hard problem.
That. For some reason, it always just like doesn't compute for me, but yeah.
But it's like, there's cost-based, there's competition, and there's sort of value-based.
And everybody's moving to cost-based right now. Like that's
moving to cost-based, which is like not great, but also maybe required. And then the other company was helping figure out where the hell you're spending all your money on software, which to your point, by the way, how many people in my org am I also upgrading because they exhaust their limits? And I'm like, this is the best $200 I'm going to spend all week. I'm going to do it anyway. But boy, am I getting boiled alive by it. I think it's really interesting because there's real utility in AI, real utility, top to bottom. But it is currently expensive and it's wildly unpredictable. Right? Like
the expense is unpredictable. The distribution of your users that Fareed talked a lot about this is massive. And that used to not matter, but it really matters now because to Claude's point, like their top 5% were costing them so much money, right? That because they were doing things that they weren't expecting, like running Claude code in the background 24/7, just consuming tokens nonstop. So,
and why not? Right? If you give me an all I can eat buffet pricing, I'm just gonna be like, sure, Claude, spin up 4 million experiments and then, choose the one that happens to work rather than me thinking a little more thoroughly up front. Like, seems like a good trade. I think we're in like the tweener no man's land stage of this. We've moved to, okay, well, if we can't figure out a distribution across our customers that prevents us from getting eaten alive on the back end, then we don't have enough data to predict it, or it's changing too fast. There's no formula to look at. Then we must move to cost-based pricing. And that seems to be where a lot of folks are going. At best, they have a hybrid model, but a lot are going to cost-based pricing. And I think the problem with that is it is really opaque to an end user what their costs are going to be.
Yeah.
So let me give you the best examples and the worst examples. I love making AI videos for my friends or for advertising. It's just a lot of fun. I vibe coded up pipelines to do this. It's really predictable. I know what it's going to cost me per second of AI video. And the length of a video is a pretty useful metric. I don't know how many iterations it's going to take me, but I know what I'm getting each iteration. Now you contrast that with something really useful like a Manus, which can go out and do a bunch of deep research and project work for you. I have no idea what the token costs are going to be up front when I ask it to do a thing. And yet I'm being charged on a credit basis. No clue. I have no clue. I have no hope of knowing. And the AI, frankly, has no hope of knowing what it's going to cost either. Right. And you kind of get back to the same problem, which they don't have nearly enough data to even help predict what the cost is going to be. So as a consumer of these credit-based systems, I'm left either massively overpaying for credits, and I know it. I'm constantly being nickeled and dimed or, boiled alive like a frog, pulling more credits out of me. And I just feel frustrated. And the worst one in the middle for both the product builder and myself is the one where I'm hesitant to use the product because I don't know what it's going to cost me. And then I don't engage as much. And you lose understanding of your customers, providing them value. And I certainly lose the value I would have gotten. I find myself in that messy middle bucket very frequently with these credit-based products. I don't have a good solution for this. I'm not sure anybody does. I think the best are probably these like hybrid methods.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a tough spot.
Where do you think it ends up? Do you think things get more stable, the underlying costs get more stable and therefore more predictable, and as a result, we can move away from this credit-based pricing? Or do you think this is kind of a permanent fixture of, the next decade of software?
Let me go on the record and say I think it'll be a permanent fixture of the next phase of software. But in this in-between, we're going to try to fight like hell to return to models that we like.
Yeah.
And let me justify why. And why it's going to be complicated in the middle. I mean, we didn't even talk about the House of Cards dynamic that somebody was tweeting about the other day, which I love, which is like, wait a second. So VCs are subsidizing companies that subsidize token cost to customers, but the VCs are subsidizing the people, serving the tokens up, which are, paying for graphics cards, which are being propped up by public investors expecting more. And it's like, what happens when we reach a point where all that subsidization gets collapsed out? Do costs skyrocket? Do we thread the needle? It might be bumpy. But here's my thought process. I think human beings, we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of cognitive capability to devote to pricing. So we're looking for the fastest path to smart decisions. Right? It's like the reason we price them flat monthly in a lot of ways or based on the packages or the utility, the value metric, which is probably the most useful, is it's very easy for us to say, okay, I'm always getting a good deal here. Let's go for it. Right? The cost plus pricing requires me to understand your operations and then compare them to mine, which is a huge cognitive load. So I think we're going to fight like hell to not do cost-based pricing because it's just super unnatural as human consumers. And look, one of the reasons we don't do that today is because compute is so effing cheap, right? Generally speaking, compute is so cheap these days with modern techniques. It's just that this new graphics card-based LLM compute is particularly expensive right now, right? Mm-hmm. That said, ultimately, as a consumer of AWS or any infrastructure platform, you are paying for units of compute and units of storage and units of bandwidth. They have boiled it down to the cost, like entirely. And we are okay with that in those scenarios. And so I think what's going to happen is we're going to fight like heck that if humans are doing the purchasing decisions to not add this cognitive overload, but at some point in the future, it will come down to intelligence is a utility like electricity. Like I actually agree with Altman there on that one. And then we're going to find ways to just have the AI itself thread the needle better for us on the back end and just do sort of utilization, pure utilization.
Yeah. The other side of this equation, there's costs in how you price your product. The other side of this equation is willingness to pay. And that's the other thing that I've been trying to wrap my head around, because even in just this year, you watch the willingness to pay for these products drastically shift. Like if we were looking at Reddit threads of Cursor or one of these other products communities in Q1. The Reddit threads are dominated by things like, oh my God, like this thing for $20 completed this thing that would have taken me 2 weeks and, maybe 10 grand of developer time. And they're like mind blowing. But you look
Right.
at all of the Reddit threads now, and Q3 is littered with just angry customers of like, oh my God, this thing cost me 10 credits and it like shouldn't have. And it's an indication of how the commoditization of this starts amazing, like for consumers. But over time, I think there's this whole narrative around how, it's going to tap into human labor budgets, and people are going to constantly compare like all of this AI to what it might have cost them in human time. But you can already see that is actually probably not true. That just in a matter of 3 quarters for something like Cursor, the people who are using Cursor have lost all grasp of thinking about, oh, this thing would have cost me 2 weeks and, 10 grand of developer time, to it automatically the price pressure being pushed down to thinking of it more like true software. And I think people just value software differently. And the more that AI becomes more and more commonplace, AI starts to look more and more just like how we think about software, not how we compare it to what it would have cost us in human time. So that's the other side of this equation. And so like to your point, if costs just skyrocket at some point, if prices just go up at some point, then there's like this whole question of, is the willingness to pay still there for some of these use cases or not? And maybe some of these use cases just implode.
I want to push back in a way on this, but you see a lot of complaining. The internet's great at surfacing complaining.
Fair enough.
Right.
Especially Reddit. Especially Reddit.
And that's where I go to complain after X. I try to complain in multiple mediums. So you see that. On the other hand, their revenue numbers are astronomical. So It's not like, it doesn't seem to actually be reflective of true behavior.
I know.
I remember when Devon came out and they said they were priced at $500 a month, and people were like, that's insane. And I'm like, all day, every day, give me the $1,000 a month plan. Like, that is so cheap when you consider that the time it takes a human even just to fix a copy change on an app is like measured in minutes, plus following up on the deploy, like no brainer. But we are dumb monkeys at the end of the day, and we're on the hedonic adaptation treadmill. And so when you're used to like, okay, well, I can just generate up a ton of software using these agents now, but also the bar of what expectations for software is going up. The bar is going up for how quickly I can get it out the door. Suddenly it just becomes your background condition, and you start complaining about these costs. But to me, this just comes back to, it's not that the costs are out of whack so much as people have no expectations that they can anchor on, because credits are a really weird way to measure productivity. I still don't know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would not be able to predict. It's like doing stupid, estimate poker for Agile. Like if we're doing credit poker for agents to bid and have, agents bid back to me, I think I could do this for 100 credits. Maybe that's the model. I don't know, because I have no ability to guess this. But what I have enough data from my career to suggest that we are saving a ton of time and we're doing more. I think the back pressure will come the other way, though, which is like, yeah, you can complain about how little you're getting relative to your new expectations, but what's your alternative? Are you going to go hire another person? It's still vastly cheaper than that.
I guess
so. I just think it's
using Devon as your example, right? I just feel like in 3 years, maybe even less time, that alternative that you're comparing to just completely disappears, right? Like you will
the human alternative.
I'm not saying humans disappear. I'm just saying in your mind, the alternative that you compare that to will not be humans making copy changes. It will be to some other piece of software, some other AI software. And
it'll be a race. So I think it could be, we could, if you're going to interview agents, and we know how to interview humans, sort of, not really. We're actually bad at this, but
we're terrible at this. It's a deeply fundamentally flawed process, and even
it's
though people,
totally flawed.
Yes.
But let me posit how it might go for agents. I don't know if this is actually going to happen, but let's say for the future where we would never consider a human doing code changes, because like, are you kidding me? You're going to have like this thing that moves at this glacial pace, do these things that happen, instantaneously. So how would I compare agents? I would marshal out a task to all of them and see which ones meet the mark and how many credits they spent. And so it's going to be
already happening 100%. We see this in the AI prototyping space. People take the same prompt, put it in Lovable, Bolt, Reforge build, right? And compare the outputs, and compare essentially the consumption. Yeah.
So you can imagine AI procurement doing this automatically.
Oh,
right?
God.
Across many different dimensions. But that's why I think it's going to come back, Brian, to that utilization pricing, because it's a race to the bottom for all those folks to prove that they can deliver the same quality or better for less, for the same or less, right? And so it's sort of a race to the bottom on this stuff. I mean, AI ought to be massively deflationary for things we're doing today. And I think this is exactly how you get there.
Yeah. I hadn't taken it that far to just thinking about how a procurement agent would literally just, you basically give this procurement agent like a few evals, a few tests,
Yeah.
and
Right.
then the agent goes and gives it to the 5 competing products in the software space and probably has some eval of cost, speed, and quality of output, and essentially makes a recommendation and decision.
And the moment you automate this, you can constantly be recalibrating it for very cheap. You want to recalibrate every quarter. We never do that
Mm,
historically, but now
God, yeah. Yeah.
but how much do you want to pull that in? Because if you're
Yeah.
doing like
Oh, there's this
10,000
new there's
operations,
this new player, yeah, that's promising
go.
X,
We already have the
last
data. Just run this
bing,
on
yeah,
them.
let me click this
Yep.
button and see if that's true or not. Oh my
And if
God.
it looks
Yeah.
promising, take your old workload, run some percentage of it through, and if it's statistically significant, move over to them. We will have massive flows of compute shooting around to the best new flavor of AI prompting and infrastructure techniques. It's going to get wild. I just don't, what we classically think of as stable is not there because, look, and I can say all this because I was working in procurement for a couple of years, but like the reason software was sticky was because it was hard to move your data and it's hard to retrain people.
Yeah.
AI needs no retraining. It will not be hard to have AI adopt a new tool. And everything's going to be API-ified because if AI can run a browser, I can reduce your product to an API at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a lot of just dollar flow whiplash.
All
And
the
so
old all the old benchmarks and kind of mentalities towards LTV and churn rates are just going to be completely irrelevant in that type of world. So,
if the efficacy is measurable, right? And if it's not, I don't like, what is it? Vibe based,
yeah.
But I think it's going to be weird. That's what I'm saying. So I
That
think terminally it's
argues a
going to end up there.
massive value compression in these
Well,
types
what
of
did you
companies.
expect
Yeah.
with AI though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think
Yeah.
that's the thing we're forgetting. I don't buy the folks that try to say that, it's just going to be like 10x more of the same, but 10x more. I think it's going to be, no, I think it's going to be like most things that were software or intellectual labor are going to end up at the price of electricity. Again, Altman's insight here, I think, is correct. We don't know
And-
when, we don't know the exact path, but I think that the physics of it seem to indicate that.
Yeah. On this note, I'm blanking on the name, but I've seen this something that was developed by some YC company or some YC person, which was a leaderboard of all these products in the AI prototyping space, who basically have just created a public version of this. They have some set of prompts in the background and they grade them, and it's like this leaderboard that updates. I don't know how often it updates, but probably like on a daily or weekly basis, and then they're just like the rankings are changing of like who's doing a better job at at these
Yeah.
things. So yeah, your G2 crowd, human-based reviews is that were incentivized and bought basically by the company are essentially
Via coffee, Starbucks bribes. That's over.
that's right. And yeah, it starts to look way more like an actual leaderboard of like some sports league or something like that.
And it comes down to, can you or someone else come up with reasonable grading? But here's the thing. Here's what made grading, like, metrics have always been tough because it's hard to come up to quantify things. And one way to quantify things that people don't like, we like counting. We love counting. It's pretty objective. We don't like quantifying of like, hey, human, you're our internal evaluator. Rate this on a scale of 1 to 5, and we will trust your judgment. No one ever trusts that person's judgment, right? We just don't. But if AI can turn the qualitative into the quantitative, and we're at least quantifying the model that's doing that and the prompt, we hold those things fixed. There's no, like, it's not like a judge just before lunch who makes people go to jail more often because they're hungry and angry. It is a repeatable thing if we've pinned down the model and the prompt. So we can actually, I do think that even some of these things that are qualitatively judged, we will be able to quantify in ways that we'll at least agree on enough to move forward.
All right, well, let's transition to our next topic. So Notion last week launched their agent platform. Simply put, allows you to create basic agents on top of all of the knowledge that you have stored in Notion. Demo one that they basically show is creating a bug tracker right? So it'll automatically create a Notion database. It might absorb certain things from like a Slack channel, automatically log the bugs in that Notion database for you to organize. Something that you might have done, a PM might have done manually before. The interesting thing that, and I texted you about this over the weekend, is feels like the 12th agent platform that looks exactly they all look the same, whether it's them or Atlassian launching that, or one of these project management tools like a Monday. They all feel like they are enabling the exact same thing, which is I've got some form of project management coordination work. I'm going to layer this agent platform on top of it with very little distinction in between.
Yeah. Well, I think it represents a massive identity crisis and confusing transition and a fundamental devaluation of a lot of these companies' underlying platforms. And so without having like a specific concrete thesis of where I think this is headed, let me at least outline what I think the problem is. These tools were all invented to help humans coordinate around consistent data and run a consistent process with some good UX.
Mm-hmm.
And in the age of AI, where essentially intellectual labor is now, let's call it free. I mean, there's token costs, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it's dramatically lower than, human costs.
Mm-hmm.
All of these platforms have an opportunity, which they're going to be forced by their competitors to take, to layer on AI agents that work with that data to do more for you. But if you think about what's going on with that, those agents are fundamentally skirting all those investments in user experience, in collaborative features, and just sort of doing the underlying thing that needs to be done. And I think if you take a step back from this, and I think I said this on this podcast a while ago, like, what do I think the terminal state is for agents in a company? It's like you as CEO of a company have a trusted layer of people who do things on your behalf, and shy of reports, you really don't get into the collaborative workflow of what you're asking them to do. Like, I think that's kind of where this is all headed. And in a world where you've got bug filing agents and document agents that look stuff up and contribute docs back and just manage all of that collaboration and context management for you, none of that UI UX matters anymore. And it's really just what's the pathway to the agents. And there, I think it just opens the door for a great flattening between all these platforms. It opens the door for entirely new platforms that can rapidly generate that context. It pulls people like Glean straight into the mix as well. We're leveraging that context to do similar things.
Yes,
and I just
Glean
think
was another one that felt like same exact agent platform. Yes, that was another one. Yeah.
They're all gonna head there, because all of this work to coordinate humans around shared state with a shared UX is being undermined by the fact that agents don't care about your UX and can adapt really quickly to any UX, and could be just as good at coordinating context on a file system as they would be in a Notion directory.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think there's this incredible leveling that's coming. And there won't be a lot of differentiation at the end of it.
I mean, the thought that goes through my head too is like, who's then best positioned? Like, is this just a transition into the new world, right? Because these folks have all of this knowledge and context stored in their tools, they just kind of see this as an intermediary step to the future of the world? Or does like some new tool specifically designed for a context store in the AI age emerges? Because look, yes, like connecting ChatGPT or Claude to your Notion is partially helpful, but all of the knowledge stored in Reforge's Notion, as an example, was not designed to optimize for that specific use case. And if you were to build a context store for AI, how different does that look? And do you interact with that fundamentally differently than people are interacting with Notion? And is that just a bridge too far for Notion, Atlassian, Glean, whoever it is to get to?
I think it's a bridge too far for them. I just think it's going to be... you'd have to be very strategic to stay ahead of this. And I think you want to focus on new accounts. Like what is the experience for new accounts in this world that we're in today? And if you don't have a solid answer for that, the game is up, because nothing else is really going to matter. Before I answer that, let me say, I actually don't think it's a problem that Reforge's Notion was not tuned for AI, because I just think that AI is going to require less and less tuning. Right? I don't know if you've seen what Devin can do for code bases. I actually think this is spectacular. You can point it at a code base, it can do PRs, but it will also go through your entire code base, and for its own purposes that happen to benefit the team using it, will generate a wiki of all the architecture, the patterns, the locations of things. It is not inconceivable that an agent, even built by these platforms, could look at your content and internally organize it or reorganize it for you in such a way that makes it better for humans and agents. And I would argue like what's good for the goose is good for the digital gander as well. So I don't think there's going to be much distinction there. So I don't worry about your organization. What I will say though is that like, are those PMs thinking about that? Because as humans, we'll put contradictions in the content all the time, and AI will get tripped up by that. We won't as easily because we have slightly more prime memory of like, oh, that's an old pattern. We don't do that. Right. But you need your AIs to kind of know that as well. I go back to like, I think everything's up for grabs. And I would think first principles of how knowledge gets captured in the first place. If you had a tool, let's assume you new company starting today. If you had a tool that took in all the raw data from what your team was collecting, it could automatically be organized into a context library for your organization. So what is that? Emails, phone calls,
meetings,
Zooms, whatever it is, right? And so like, and keep in mind, call recording, email parsing, this is so commodity these days, right? Everybody has all this and it's only getting better. The door is certainly open for someone to do an incredible job of coming up automatically with your corporate context.
Yeah, so it's almost like, I almost think about it in two places. It's all these project management-y types of platforms live in this weird middle where on one end, you have like the root source of where this context is captured. Like you said, the conversations, the meeting recordings, and there's a bunch of tools there. You've got the Otters and the Fathoms and the Granolas. And then the other side of it is actually where users are shifting their daily habits to, which I would argue is more in the places like Cursor, ChatGPT, Claude, and a few other places where they might actually trigger these agents, type in commands of what they want to do. And I feel these project management platforms are in this weird middle where the use case I think of is not triggering an agent from one of those platforms. And when I think about that, I think about going to Claude, ChatGPT, Cursor, one of those other environments. And so it's interesting, like they are neither at the root source, nor are they at the place of habit. Except, you do see some of these folks like Notion, they now have the meeting transcriber. So you do see them pushing in those directions, but it's certainly not where my habits are. My habits are still Granola to capture meetings and those other platforms I'm talking on and like where I would type in these commands.
Yeah. Well, I think it's smart that they have meeting capture now, right?
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. I think if you are, again, I go back to like what was defensible in legacy SaaS, and we talked about this before. System of record and like workflows to coordinate humans habitually, that's just not nearly as valuable as it used to be. And that's why I think like the foundation has liquefied under these companies. They're doing a little bit of a Wile E. Coyote. I mean, don't get me wrong, tons of revenue, tons of customers, tons of habituation. But sort of the future's coming fast here. So if they don't move out to those edges, either like doing the work in a really meaningful way itself, or capturing all the context in the first place to enable themselves or other tools to do the work and just be that sort of central repository, it's going to end up being a no man's land. Is that 2 years? Probably not. Is it,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm like bad. I always bet, several years too early, but
it's not
it's coming.
Yeah, it's not a technology thing. It's how fast we change these habits. I mean, this kind of puts into light some of Atlassian's aggressive acquisitions. I wrote an article on the acquisition of the browser company because I thought it was an interesting one. Tech Twitter did its thing and memified the whole thing. But I took the approach in that article of, well, there's some really smart people, right? Let's assume that for a second, what might be some, reasons to actually make that acquisition? Because it just didn't make sense to a lot of people. And one of the core reasons I thought about, which was essentially we do have these new points of entry into our work where our habits are shifting. I mentioned a bunch of them and a lot of them feel like that game Atlassian can't win that game. Atlassian's not going to go up against ChatGPT or Claude. It feels like the browser as an entry point of one of these habits where we might fire off agents to do work is another one of those potential entry points that still hasn't 100% been determined yet. There's a lot of people making bets. There's rumors about ChatGPT working on it and a couple others. And so kind of realize this, okay, agents, existential crisis, this thing that I've owned for 20 years and monetized and built my whole strategy off of like acquiring adjacencies to Jira, not as valuable anymore. Like, let's start to take some bets on like pushing towards these edges. They did the other acquisition, DX, which I get why it fits their customer base. I don't know how it fits the broad future of AI.
I read an article on DX that was essentially saying it would start giving them the metrics to understand how well certain agents or coding output of agents was performing. And that would give some sort of like feedback loop on efficacy. I don't know either. I mean, if you're listening Atlassian, come on, divulge your grand strategies. Let's tear it apart. But I think you're right. I think it makes sense to some degree to me that they should be seeking out as high upstream into the workflow as they can get to get ahead of as much as they can. And maybe they need to start buying, the granolas of the world as well. Right. The other end of it, I think, is interesting but complicated. I mean, I personally think, despite my computer science background and degree, that coding will be dead within a short number of years here. But it would make sense in the meantime to get as embedded in the world of what's going on there, where sort of like the frontier of agents in a lot of ways is right now. It's like the work agents are doing stuff, but they're English adapters for automations, 99% of the cases. There's some really cool agentic ones, but they're much rarer. Whereas coding agents are a very real frontier right now that you can see market improvement from one release to the next. And so it makes sense to try to get closer and closer to that. At the tip of the spear.
Okay, random question for you. You're still a super early stage company, but let's say you were just starting a company from scratch today. You're like a year and a half in, something like that. And maybe you're already doing all of these things. How would you be setting up for the future of AI? Like thinking about like this Uber context store, would you be documenting things in the same way as Notion, or like what kind of new best practices is to like store all of this context, feeling like the trajectory of these companies? And I know some companies, every meeting is recorded, unless it's like an HR meeting. All those meetings go to some central repository. It doesn't matter who's participating.
It's exactly right.
How we build our startups going forward, that's different than history.
There are spectrums of this, by the way. I've seen companies leaning in incredibly aggressively to this.
Yeah.
There's definitely a point of no return where it's or diminishing or even negative returns. But let me tell you at least what I would do and what we're doing that I think is compatible with that. So number one, we're a fully remote organization at Appy. We got people all over the world. The same thing I do to keep good hygiene for a remote distributed org, I think actually matters for the AI because they cannot sit in the same room with you. So in some sense, we're almost better positioned to solve this problem because you don't have any of that off digital conversation happening. Everything's digitally mediated. We have a chance to record everything.
Yeah.
So number one, all of our meetings get recorded, like full stop. And we use
Where do they go
AI
though?
In our case, they go to Day.ai is the one recording them all. And
Okay.
you can actually parse over that database using their agent framework to do quite a bit. Plus it distributes meeting notes after the fact. Now, what we don't have is like turning that into knowledge context to push into a directory or a Notion, but we could do it after the fact. It's all mineable, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The second thing that we do is a rubber ducking policy. It's like every person, the organization's expected to sort of live blog their day in Slack. And that's a way to externalize your thought process into digital form so that your colleagues can keep up to date and help when they can sort of see around a corner for you. But that works just as well for our agents, which can read over Slack. So that's how we're solving it. But there are companies that are like going even further. So like that's just called like basic AI level hygiene, record everything on some level and get people to verbalize more and don't have meat space conversations that don't get right. Char stuff aside.
And before you go on, are there the spectrum? Like we had this summit with about 100 product leaders, and it was all about what people are trying internally. And the VP product from Carvana came in and talked about this thing that he calls baselining. And what they did is, to your point of like thinking out loud, is they went around the team and had everybody essentially brain dump how the parts of the product that they work on actually work, both from the user perspective and from behind the scenes. And then they took that and they structured it all into essentially what they call a baseline document context. It actually ends up just being a massive structured Google Doc at the moment. But that way it was getting all of these things that people would typically call institutional knowledge out.
Right.
In a structured way, and they use that to feed it into all of the different AI tools. And of course, now the question becomes, how do you maintain it and update it?
Yep. There's also terms like best known method, documentation, similar type stuff. But I think that the meta insight is that all work has sort of become meta work in a way, which is if you're just turning the crank once, you're failing. If you can turn the crank once, as long as you follow up and say, here's how to turn the crank, right? And why it's important to turn the crank and what a good crank turning looks like. And that document is the actual new endpoint for now you've really done the work, because now we can train an AI agent the moment they become capable enough to do that work. 90% of stupid ops work probably can do a chunk of that today. Not all can. I think eventually more will fall. So the folks that I think are really leading the way here are doing that documentation, but they have a sight on they're always building the machine of the organization. If you're ever doing something by hand, it's an experiment. It's not work. And if you think it's work, it's the precursor to the real work, which is why were you doing what were you doing? How would you know what succeeded? And how did you do it so we could train the agent on it? Everybody's always a process designer now. They have to understand what good outcomes are. They have to understand what good metrics are, if possible, or what good judgment is, good heuristics, and writing up that as though they're about to hand that job off to someone else. That raises the bar considerably. And I think this is actually like part of the challenge for, the junior cohorts coming in to companies to work, is that you kind of have to like build a lot of that muscle. Whereas right now it's like, there's an opportunity. If you can write that stuff down and be a good manager and writer, you actually have a ton of leverage these days. So I think that the new school of companies are really leaning into that heavily. And that's where I think, by the way, the diminishing returns can come in, which is, I believe that will be the future of work, is that we sort of front run things either with a co-pilot or with a goal, but ultimately the end goal is not having done the thing, it's that output. But you can get into a situation these days where like, yes, that is the future, but maybe if the AI isn't just there yet, you'd be beating your head against a wall, training an agent and getting no returns back on it. Because also, how often are you doing that? There's a classic XKCD that shows like how often you do a task versus what the automation will save you. And I don't know many people that can mentally do that calculus on the fly, especially when it's uncertain if it can be automated today, eventually, but we don't know.
Well, the funny thing is like the more often you do something, that just means the deeper the habit is, and the deeper the habit is, the harder it is to break. So
right, and the more blind you are,
the
more blind you are to it. I mean, what I haven't seen yet, and here's a product for someone ambitious out there, right, is like some tool that watches my work and tells me what's repeatable and is good fodder for being agentified.
Well, so wait, that actually triggers. This is an aside, but like there was this article from The Information over the weekend about how all of the foundation models and all these data labeling companies have now started to build custom software to just basically record specialists and experts doing work on top of all these cases to train these models. The other end of that,
there we have a dearth of like useful data streams of people doing work. We have like what people Twitch stream or put on YouTube, but actually watching people do prosaic work day in and day out is a massive useful corpus to feed the AI. And by the way, Meta's going the other direction with their AR glasses, which is like, how do we get just regular physical life, more footage? Mm-hmm. Google probably has one of the largest corpuses of that. Tesla's certainly amassing theirs. The robotics companies will try. But anybody who's got AR glasses, now you've got a massive new corpus of like, here's how the world works. So, that's the other run around here. Okay.
All right. I think that's a good place to pause for the day. Or if you have any other hot takes you want to pen to the end here.
There's so many hot takes, man. I mean, it's just like, what a time to be thinking about software in business right now during the single biggest massive shuffle up. Like I cannot shake how wild and weird and cool it is to be here right now, whether any of us win or lose, or God knows what happens. Like, what an intellectual exercise.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, man. Thanks for joining today. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Balfour, founder and CEO of Reforge. If you are looking to level up on AI, we have an upcoming cohort of Reforge courses all around AI, including AI foundations, mastering AI productivity, AI strategy, AI leadership, and the course that I just completely rewrote, AI growth. All of these are baked in timeless foundational principles of how to tackle these topics, but includes all the new ingredients that we have around AI. You go incredibly deep, incredibly fast. Each of these courses is the equivalent of 400 to 500 pages, about 20 hours of video, and they're led by expert operators, people that are actually on the front lines implementing the things that they are talking about. Go to reforge.com/courses to check out all of the courses that we're offering in this upcoming cohort starting October 14th.